It's showtime.
This is gonna suck.
Warning, your connection to reality has suddenly quit. Now reconnecting. In the darkest depths of cyberspace, there is a lost dimension, home to wonders unseen, terrors unspeakable, and stories unlike any ever told. Do not click back. Do not reload. You have been reconnected to Dimension 404.
It's like watching Star Wars for the first time.
Good morning.
We need to go back to the moment this all began.
When you drink Impulse 9, you're stretching time.
At Make a Match, we believe there's someone out there for everyone.
I watch out for that thing.
Dimension 404.
Now let's bring up the panel moderated by Sujata Day.
Hey guys. Come on up. Welcome to the Dimension 404, the future in digital storytelling. I'm Sujata Day. I'm your grateful moderator. Thank you. Thank you for that. That was an exciting trailer, huh? That was cool. So I'm excited to chat with our guests today. To the left of me is Freddie Wong. He is...
Hello.
Yes. He is known for his past with very successful YouTube series called Video Game High School, and now he has started ROCKETJUMP production company, and he has partnered with Lionsgate to bring you Dimension 404. All of the episodes are on Hulu right now, so I know you guys are all going to go home and binge watch it tonight, right? And then right after Freddie, we have Cherish Chen. She is a producer.
Hello. Oh, no. All right.
She is a producer at ROCKETJUMP, and she is fantastic. Her background is USC Film School, and she helped found ROCKETJUMP Film School, which is a free online film school for upstart filmmakers, which is amazing. We really need that. Yay, Cherish. Cherish, killing it. And then we have Jennie. Jennie, what's up? Jennie Yamaki. She is here from Lionsgate. The Lionsgate has partnered with Dimension 404 to bring it to Hulu. And we're so happy that you guys are here with us today.
Yay.
Thanks for being here. Yay. So first of all, I would love to chat with Freddie a little bit about your beginnings.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay? Everybody always wants to know where you came from. What I would love to talk about Video Game High School and how that came about and who you partnered up with to kind of bring that to YouTube and yeah, your background.
Yeah, sure. So I started out making, I think my first video was with my brother. We had pool cues, and I was really into Star Wars, and we had a way of getting that footage into a computer. So my first videos were like me, and my brother having dope sword fights or lightsaber fights in our and breaking things in the dining room. We were not allowed to use the pool cues in that way after we broke them. But it made for very entertaining lightsaber fights. And I think, like editing vacation videos and stuff like that growing up, I really kind of sort of caught filmmaker bug like in high school, and then went to USC Film School. And then afterwards, graduating, like I think the sort of myth at the time, and I think even to some extent still is, as far as like your path to becoming a filmmaker was, and in film school it was make a independent film, get it into Sundance, get it into one of the festivals, and then someone will see it in the festival, and then you all set. That's it. That was the three-step process. Cool. And by and large, I think by the time I had graduated, which was 2008, it was like, I don't know anybody who actually did that who actually like got. I was like, this feels like a pretty low hit rate. So I went into sort of various freelance stuff. We started making direct to DVD movies with the theory being that it doesn't matter the difference between a good movie and a bad movie. You still have to like pay people the same amount of money, right? Like the process, the producing process that goes into a good or a bad movie is probably about the same. There's other parts that make it a good or a bad movie, but like it still costs X dollars a head to feed your crew. So wanting to learn the producing side of things, and then in the meantime, had seen YouTube as this place, not necessarily where it was like, ooh, this is going to be a showcase for short films, but it was like a place where people were doing interesting things and building up an audience around what they were doing. And so the idea was to be like, okay, well, if we can maybe build up an audience around what we're doing, we get to kind of do the Kevin Smith thing, which is like, he has this sort of built-in audience for his work because of his reputation, his work. Maybe we get to skip that. Maybe we can have a built-in audience for who are sort of into what we do by doing these YouTube videos. And on, as a side effect, we get to practice some of the crazy ideas that we have, our visual effects ideas, our, little action scene ideas. So that was essentially like where we started. In 2010, we started like working and taking YouTube as like a full-time job, which was, pretty ridiculous, I think, at the time, because it was like YouTube had just started doing like advertising and like sharing in that revenue with their partners. And we were fortunate in that we were living in like, not too far away from here, but back before it was hip and cool. So the, monthly rent was enough that myself and, my roommates, Brandon and Sam and Nico, who are guys on the Corridor Digital channel, we could afford to just work on YouTube videos and be fine. And so then Video Game High School was this idea that had been floating around beforehand, and the thought was to be like, oh, well, now that we've built up like a YouTube channel a little bit, let's try making like a longer form series. Because I think the big difference is for us growing up, like I grew up with Blockbuster Video, I grew up with watching movies, and that was what I wanted to do growing up. And so as a result, it's like, okay, let's do long form storytelling. So we tried crowdfunding it. Every single season of Video Game High School is funded with this potpourri of different methods. Everything from part crowdfunding, part private investment, part sponsorship deals. Every single season was a different way of getting it out there. But it was all sort of based on the idea of like, well, we have a group of people who are like fans of what we do, so let's make stuff for them.
Yeah, I also loved when I was watching Video Game High School, I loved the production quality is amazing. So I know that some of the advice that I give to filmmakers is like, just go out and shoot it. And like, who cares about the production quality? But then I watched Video Game High School and I was like, this is like I could watch this in a movie theater and it's fabulous. So did you always go out to make sure that the production quality was top notch?
Well, so we get, because of our, because I grew up doing visual effects in my movies, and it was coming out of necessity because I liked action movies and like Hard Boiled and like Face Off was like a very important, and The Matrix were very important movies for me growing up. And then I was like, cool, I want to do gunfight scenes. It's like, we totally don't get to use blank firing guns when you're in high school. That's not a thing. But so we were like, okay, well, how can we do that with visual effects, and how can we add in like all the little effects and stuff like that? Mm-hmm. So we cheat a little bit because we get to use our visual effects skills to like try and make things look cool, And also when we started, the premise of Video Game High School is it's a future where pro gaming is like the biggest sport in the world, which was a wild and insane idea at the time that we were talking about. But now it's like, oh yeah, sure, whatever, everyone, it's already happening. But obviously, when you're in the world of video games, there's a lot of options that you can go down. You could be, some of the early stuff that we had talked about was like, what if we did like a crazy space game and there's people flying around and stuff? And very quickly we were like, well, okay, what can we do? We can do action stuff that's a little more grounded. That's like sort of first-person shooter, sort of gunfight type of stuff. That's more realistic, and it fits this specific genre of game. But it's also one that we can do and make it look pretty good for not tons and tons and tons of money, And so that was always kind of the balance. And I think with everything that we do, we always kind of try and balance the bang for your buck kind of approach, which is like, what's the coolest thing you can put out there and have a good impact without making you immediately be like, oh, that looks like cheap, and you're doing a shortcut on it.
Yeah, it was fabulous. I'm going to move on to Cherish. Hey, girl.
Hi.
So Cherish, I would love to also kind of get into your background and what brought you to ROCKETJUMP, and also kind of the founding of ROCKETJUMP Film School and how you decided on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see, how did I end up at ROCKETJUMP? I black out when I think of this too much. I don't know why, I forget. But so actually, my husband, Will, knew Freddie from film school. He also went to USC Film School. He's here. So I met these guys kind of like through a family connection, but then I was producing movie trailers at the time. I had spent a couple years in film marketing and, had a good experience doing it, but it wasn't like you weren't creating anything. You were like, you were kind of helping people sell something. So I kind of had that itch still, and then at the time, they were looking for someone to launch film school. The idea had kind of been gestating. Lauren Haratunian, who works with us quite a bit, she's a cinematographer who shot a lot of the Rocket Jump videos. She wanted to do something where she could show women behind the camera, because she's a cinematographer, right? And she had shot a lot of the BTS for Video Game High School, and looking at the Rocket Jump audience, there was a ton of, aspiring filmmakers, aspiring content creators who would look at Freddie and Brandon, Sam and Nico and all the crew and be like, I feel a connection to this. I want to do this as my, my life's purpose. And the BTS was kind of satisfying that, but we wanted to take it into a more constructed kind of route. So I came on as the producer of the film school. We launched almost 2 years ago. I think May 2nd is our birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, it's nuts. But yeah, so we launched with like 16 videos. We went to watch Avengers the night before at midnight and then came back and uploaded. But it's been really great. I mean, the whole idea was equipment and how to distribute has been really democratized. Like, you can shoot something on your iPhone. We always talk about the movie Tangerine a lot. That went to Sundance and was shot on an iPhone. So you can take what you have in your pocket, tell a narrative, and put it out, and you can find an audience with it now. Like, how powerful is that, right? Yeah. And then, but the kind of the knowledge to tell stories, in this kind of constructed, educational way was still kind of behind closed doors. Like, the film industry calls clothespins C-47s, when you just can call them clothespins. Like, why is that, which we had a separate discussion about this, like calling them something sillier. Anyway, so we wanted to make that available and open to everyone, so we put out this YouTube channel. We started out by putting 2 videos up a week, and what really was to just have people look at the tools they had in a way that always put story forward. Yeah. Like, why do you choose a high angle? Why do you choose a low angle? Why do you use a filter? Why do you do any of this? And it's for narrative purposes. Yeah. And the goal is so that, we have better stories for everyone. Like, we have such a powerful platform digitally now, and everyone should take advantage of that, but like, learn how to tell your stories in a powerful way that are your stories, Yeah. So that's kind of how it all started, and we've been doing it for 2 years, and it's been crazy. It's been a ride, yeah.
Do you feel like there have been success stories that you know about that have come out of the film school experience for people?
There's, what is really successful, I will say, is so we started these forums where there's kind of been this community building, and we have this section called Critique Me where people can like upload their films, and then like Rocket Jump people try and jump on and give feedback in a really constructive way. And I think the success is that like we talk to people from all over the world, which is just mind-blowing to me. About like, there's people who, are 13, 14, talking to a 29-year-old in Hungary right now, and they're just trying to figure out if they can do film. As they're passionate about it, but they are like, I don't know anybody, I don't have any friends that I can make films with. All I have is like a lamp from my parents' house and like my phone, and it's like
lamps work.
Lamps work. That's a nice soft light, if you know how to use it. But I would say the success is that you get people making stuff. It's like kind of you mentioned earlier, right? And I think it's also, we've been seeing people connect with each other on the forums, like from, like one kid is in England and one kid is in Holland, and then they like just online make stuff together. Like one person will film something and the other person will compose the music for it.
And it's all about collaboration. So making those connections for brand new filmmakers who are in different parts of the world. They're not in LA or New York. They're in like wherever, Alabama.
Exactly.
And connecting them with other people who are like-minded. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That is definitely a success.
It's really cool.
For sure.
It's very cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Jennie, what's up down there?
Hello.
Hello. So Jennie, you are with Lionsgate. And I would love to kind of get into your background a little bit. You've worked in feature films, and now you're in the digital space. And I would love to actually learn more about what you have seen is the difference from making that jump from feature film to digital.
Oh, okay. So oddly enough, I also went to USC.
Oh, wow, okay.
Sorry, Bruins.
Sorry. So I, how do I put this? I started in indie film out of SC. I went off and did a movie with some friends in Idaho, which ended up being Napoleon Dynamite.
Whoa!
Yeah, but it wasn't Napoleon Dynamite when we did it. It was this movie I was in Utah or Idaho for 2 months. And then sort of have worked in both traditional film production companies as well as in the last few years in a digital space. Actually worked with Hugh Ho and John Chu at their YouTube Premium channel a few years ago. I've been at Pop Sugar working on digital content there. And then most recently now at Lionsgate in their Digital Studios division doing, we're doing feature-length and limited episodic like Dimension 4 content for digital distribution.
Cool.
And I would say like from a production standpoint, production is still production, and that's kind of what I do. I'm more on the physical production side. I would say that to what Cherish pointed out, there is a democratization of content, just the ability to be able to, you don't have to buy film, process film anymore. You can use your own phone and create content that way. I think from a business perspective, as filmmakers trying to get your content out there, yes, you have the ability to put it up on YouTube, get people to see it, but the question to me is always, how are you going to get people to see it? So marketing to me is still a really big, important component of it, and then also how are you going to monetize it, which I think is still being figured out. A lot of people are, doing different things, whether it's now a lot of brands are putting money into short form branded content because they see that there's a market for that. And so that is one way that I've been seeing a couple of people I know who have smaller like production companies who are creating short form commercial / branded content for the digital space. And there are companies like ROCKETJUMP who've created their own unique brand, and that's how they get, people to be able to watch their content. And so there's just different ways to approach how you are going to get eyeballs actually on your.
Yeah, those are actually really good things to bring up, because I know a question that comes up a lot is like, how do we get financing for this? How do we how do we raise a budget? And it's like, like connecting with a brand is actually like a genius idea.
And I would say that the same challenges that you would have with film are the same challenges you have even with digital content. You still have to find financing.
Yes.
You still have to so those pieces are still there. It's just there are, I would say more avenues for distribution now than before, but at the same time, I think in the past when I first started off at the production company, soon after graduating from SC, there was a certain business model for foreign pre-sales to be able to get financing that way for your projects. But now that is still a viable option, but now what I believe international sales agents are now paying, it's less than, like the market has shifted, and so there's less potential money out there, even though there are more distribution options.
Oh, that's interesting to know. Cool. Freddie, we're going to get into talking about Dimension 404, and they just watched that amazing trailer. I would love to know about, so after Video Game High School, were you approached by Lionsgate?
Yeah, so we had kind of been, talking to / in the realm of what the studio system, and again, you have to remember this is a little bit relatively 2012, which is not that long ago, but in the internet years is very long ago. We've been talking to some studios, and I think everyone was still trying to figure out exactly what the heck to do about or with YouTube. And I think you've seen how that's played out in a number of ways as time has gone on. I think that the tendency has been, for the Vine star / Snapchat star, like personality side of things, I think that, they've basically attached them to small scale production companies that are going to make a feature starring X, personality. And that has had sort of varying degrees of success. And I think that what it shows is, to me, it's like that sort of model gives you very much kind of like a miniature sort of Tyler Perry kind of thing, where like it's very sort of the content plays to their audience very much, so it doesn't necessarily go like sort of wide mainstream
it's very,
sort of way.
But
it's based on sort of what their audience is. Yeah. And what's interesting about that too is that I think that it's what that is big enough to support it, right? Like in some cases, right? And then for us, I think we've always kind of been a little bit less like influencer like based. I guess we make stuff, but we try and put sort of the content first in front of us. So we were talking and figuring that out. And what Video Game High School did for us was the first season was a 2-hour entirety cut up into web series length. The second season we essentially did 6 22s, and then the third season we essentially did 6 44-minute episodes. And what it was basically for Lionsgate, it was like a proof of concept to be like, oh, these guys can handle the formats that are saleable out overseas, right? Like it's one where you look at it and you're like, okay, cool. It's not something I have to look at where it's like, oh, it's a vlog and it's 3 minutes at a time, or it's hour-and-a-half Minecraft videos and it's like, I don't know what we can do with this, And I think that, so that was kind of where that came from, is because we still have this sort of traditional vein, through us, and it makes me think a lot about like what I think the difficulty when you look at this sort of online world and how how Hollywood is having some difficulty wrapping their head around how to deal with this group of people who have a lot of influence, who have a lot of people watching them, but don't necessarily translate as easily to the sort of traditional buckets that we've had in the past, not in the same way like that, say in the past that, SNL comedians were able to star in, say feature films and comedies in the 80s, how to handle that. And I think one of the interesting things that we realized was like, well, if you think about it, the difference is a lot of these influencers don't really make money for other people. They really are good at making money for themselves and sort of their crew, but it's like they don't necessarily lead to, I think you look at, like a movie star, everybody gets rich. Good movie goes out, everybody gets rich. But like your standard sort of influencer, they have their own group of people, they have their own way of distributing to them, they have their own way of talking to their audience. They're very sort of closed off wall, and they can handle and talk to their own sort of their audience very well, but they don't necessarily make money for other people.
Right, they sustain themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And they're self-sustaining. And I think that's harder to plug into a system that, in a lot of ways, if you look at Hollywood, it's like a lot of ways it's sharing wealth in a weird way, right? Like there's a lot of middlemen. There's a lot of places that put themselves, a lot of entities that put themselves in between product and consumer at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So that's how Lionsgate. So a big part of it was because
did they reach out to you after you had released the 44-minute episodes? Like
we had been talking. Yeah, we've been talking So there was a guy over there, Jordan Gilbert, who was sort of it's their digital guy. You know, I think there was every studio had like a digital guy at some point for a while. It's just like, I don't know. You need the
flirting. There was flirting.
There was light flirtation happening in the digital realms. Yeah.
Great. That's great. And then when they did get involved, did you just go up to them and say, hey, I have this idea for Dimension 404? Or did you kind of present a slate of projects?
Well, we had a number of things. So we had a sort of a show called Rocket Jump the Show, which was also on Hulu, which is sort of like a documentary series around the idea of like making these shorts that we do on YouTube. And Dimension 404 was an idea that had been kicking around for a very, very long time. And in its original form, it was, hey, let's try and kind of let's do this kind of like web series style. Let's do 3 15-minute like little sci-fi things. And at the time, that we were thinking about, which was around 2011, which was sort of midway through our Video Game High School run, it was like, hey, this seems like a really weird and interesting idea, anthology series and science fiction anthology. Like Twilight Zone hasn't been around for a while. So that's kind of where it started. And then over time, it evolved to the form that it was, which is now 6 44-minute episodes. But it didn't start in that sort of form. It didn't come to them in that way. Originally, it was an idea of like, hey, we want to make stuff. We like sci-fi anthology. Let's put something out there. And
did they help develop it with you in terms of the form that it's on right now at Hulu? Or did you, at ROCKETJUMP, kind of...
Well, I suppose they developed it in the sense that they're like, we can't do anything with 3 15-minute episodes of something, guys. Yeah. And we're like, yeah, you're right, huh? So in that sense, it was, getting it to right? getting it to something they could like do something with from a, because again, that's the art/commerce side of things with film, is that at the end of the day, you need to have a saleable product. You have something to sell.
The creative though, because there were some ideas that were meant to be 15-minute, right? And then obviously once it went to 44, it's like that couldn't work. Yeah.
So it kind of the idea got trashed because
it got
some of them,
it got benched.
Yes.
But then some of them expanded out. So so there was a whole process in order to bring it from our 15-minute webisode thing to something that you could turn it that you could actually sell elsewhere.
Yeah. So in terms of the lifespan of Dimension 404, so now you have Lionsgate involved, and they're obviously a great production company. And how did you bring it or decide on Hulu as the place to kind of distribute it?
So we had positive experiences with Hulu. Like, I remember hearing about like, oh, network notes, they're going to be real bad. You got to fight. You always got to fight the network. And we found that when we were doing our other show, ROCKETJUMP, the show with them, that it was by and large not the case. Like their notes were very much on point. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. This is not as bad as everyone seems to be saying it is. Yeah. And there was also the side of things where there was at the time there was this like big shift where it was technology companies wanting to be Hollywood companies or entertainment companies. And they brought a lot of these very strange technology-based kind of ideas into it, which like didn't make sense. Like, we had talked to a company that will remain unnamed, but they were talking about like, hey, here's how you guys could do a TV show, crowdfund the first episode, and then once the crowdfund hits for the first episode, you go out and make your first episode, and then you crowdfund the second episode. And it's like, that's not how production works. Like, you don't do one at a time. The whole point is you shoot all at once. That's going to be
like one episode a year then.
Right, exactly. Or, like the timelines, it was just very clear, like it was, so it was kind of this weird moment in time where people were still trying to, and even, I think this was, even at the time, like, Netflix was just starting to, figure out and get into the loop of how to do things properly and how to sort of merge the sort of digital and the sort of Hollywood world in a way that made sense. And so, Hulu was just a good partner for us for the other show, and that was, again, we went around. We did the water bottle tour, as it's called, where you go to like.
Do you want to explain that, Freddie?
Yeah, so the water bottle tours, where you go around. Where you go around. Yeah, you go around you pitch your show to all the places, and you get to sort of sample the various types of places that have water. Any place that has a Brita filter, that's lukewarm.
That's harsh.
That's bad.
Harsh.
Like the Brita filter, it's like I know you guys are trying to. I know you are trying to be environmentally friendly, but this is lukewarm water here. So we did go around. We pitched it, and we settled on Hulu.
Cool. And did Lionsgate go along with the pitches with you?
Oh yeah. They were sick and tired of us. I mean, and Will especially, who was the head writer on this one, like doing the same pitch like over and over again, which is funny because the first time you go, you're like really excited. You're like, all right, here we go, we're gonna do it. And you go through it once, and then by the seventh time you've pitched it, you might as well just be like, and then here in this story, where you're pretty much doing it on autopilot at that point. But you have to keep up the energy. So it is.
And Freddie, you're an actor, writer, director, producer. So
actor in the smallest font you have.
They love you, Freddie.
So with Dimension 404, you said there was a head writer. What was your involvement in kind of all of those categories?
So myself, Matt, and Des, sort of the three co-founders of the company. Des took on the show running duties of Dimension 404, and Matt and myself, we took on sort of directorial duties. We were all sort of executive producers, but got to focus more on being more of a director. And I think there's one insert. I think it was a lot of inserts with my hand in them, so that's the extent of my acting in this one. Was like, we need the hand insert.
You're a very successful hand model.
I'm really, really good. I know what that camera wants.
Amazing. Yay. And Cherish, what was your involvement with Dimension 404 and bringing it to life?
So my involvement with Dimension 44 was, let's see, so in the second episode, it takes place in a movie theater, so I did produce the movie that plays during the episode,
Nice.
which was bizarre. It's like a young adult parody called Chosen, the Final Saga, Part 1. It's a Hunger Games little riff. So I did that, and then I actually, because of my marketing experience, did a lot of the promotional materials afterwards, too. ROCKETJUMP kind of jumped in and supported the project in terms of like getting people to watch it, kind of activating our audience to go see it. And then obviously for film school, we were there on set to look at a lot of the special effects, the VFX. There's a lot of special effects in the show, practical stuff. So we wanted to like bring that into our audience and like make sure that they kind of got a on the ground experience of like making a show like this.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that and a lot of like BTS and stuff like that.
Yeah. In terms of marketing, I love that you brought that up. Did you like partner with someone at Lionsgate and someone at Hulu to kind of facilitate like how the marketing was gonna go?
Yeah.
And was it a lot of social media or was it traditional marketing?
It was first of all, it was a very tight turnaround because we had the April 4th for 404 release date. So once we had that date, it was kind of like we just kicked in. So we worked with Hulu's marketing department, and Lionsgate was tapping in for international sales and stuff like that. And yeah, it was like kind of a lot of social, a lot of like, again, ROCKETJUMP's known for the behind the scenes material, so we wanted to kind of give a lot of that in a constructive way. Yeah, it was a good team effort, you know. It was like kind of like activating a lot of ROCKETJUMP, and then also the cast. The cast played a huge role in it as well.
Yeah.
The cast was, I believe, Hulu's call, right? In terms of like, they pushed for bigger names to be in the show, so that once it came out, obviously we had a lot of support from them and their socials and stuff like that. And obviously they're incredibly talented and wonderful. So yeah, it was an experience. It's kind of interesting because you were talking about kind of our relationship with our audience and kind of like how much things cost. Jennie was talking about how much things cost, and I think there's an interesting disconnect between how our audience, like people who watch stuff on YouTube, think that things cost. So you're kind of like riding that line between communicating to them that this is like kind of a larger show, what kind of production this is, and how that's different than like some things you see on YouTube. There's like, there's a interesting disparity there.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of the ROCKETJUMP behind the scenes videos, was this also released on Hulu, or was it released on your YouTube channel?
So the behind the scenes and all the stuff we did on there was released on our YouTube channel.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so it was like, you know, you kind of give them an eye into the process, and then you kind of try and connect them over to Hulu as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Jennie, hi. Hi down there. I would love to actually learn more about Lionsgate and the process of bringing, I mean, we are at the LA Asian American Pacific Film Festival, and so I would love to kind of talk about diversity at this point. I think this is an important topic. And how does Lionsgate kind of reach out to diverse filmmakers and find them and foster them?
Well, so I work with, as Freddie said, Jordan Gilbert's our sort of senior creative for the Digital Studios group, and Lindsay Gomez is our other creative executive with the team. And I think one of the interesting things about the Digital Studios group, which is kind of its own little mini division that's separate from the traditional motion picture group and the traditional TV group, is that we are trying to work with more diverse talent, both behind camera and in front of camera, and stories that have a different voice to it that you might not normally hear on sort of mainstream. So they sort of keep that in mind as they are taking submissions of scripts from agents. I mean, we still get our submissions sort of a little bit in the traditional, I mean, it's not any different than any other studio or production company for that matter. It's relationships that the creative executives have, it's, you know, contacts with agents and things like that. And so but as they're looking through the material, they sort of keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And in terms of, I guess, in front of camera, as well as behind camera.
Okay. Is there a lot of kind of scouring of the internet as well, or no? It's more like the traditional sense of like.
No, I mean, I think because we are a digital, our group is digital studios. We are, in terms of casting, we try to do a blend of sort of traditional actors as well as influencers.
Yes.
So our creative executives are familiar with,
who's kind of on the pulse right now. Yeah. Yeah.
And yes, and do scour the internet for the latest and greatest, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Very cool. Freddie, this question is for you.
Okay.
I feel like I'm a game show host right now.
We can try conversing more amongst each
That's
other.
true. That's cool.
Each
Don't
other.
feel, yeah. You guys can answer this question too. It's all good.
I mean, anyone is open to answer any of these questions, obviously. But Freddie, with Dimension 404, bringing it to Hulu, I know sometimes the development process can be really long. And how was that? It seemed pretty painless. Maybe? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think honestly, most of the pain came from the initial taking it from a 15-minute sort of thing into, at first, 22s and then 44s was sort of the process through it. Because I think that necessitated, much to the chagrin of the writers, like a significant number of like retooling, sort of getting back under the hood. Because it's not just simply a matter of like adding filler into it. You need to kind of reassess every single one of your stories to make it sort of fit that timeline. But I think for the most part, in terms of like Hulu's involvement, that was nice. That was pretty hands off. And again, to speak to the diversity side of things, for us, when we were writing it and when we were putting it together, that was very high on our list of priorities. And what was interesting was that because the mandate came down from Hulu to be like, hey, look for high level sort of actors and stuff like that. It's like it ends up being pretty. This is my experience. I can't speak for anybody else. This is my experience. It ends up actually being pretty easy to try and go for that because you just have to dictate it. You just have to want it. Like at the end of the day, I think that our experience is very much like, especially with the casting directors we work with, it was like, okay, hey, we want this for this role. We want diversity for these roles, and they knew that going in. The names they were putting in front of us were because we asked for it.
Right.
And like a lot of times, like I just and this is sort of personal opinion here, but like I don't buy a lot of these arguments that people have against having an interesting and diverse cast, because it comes from, I think, this misconception in the creative world that X actor, this person's gonna be better than this person, or this person's gonna be objectively better than person B. It's not a track and field event that we're running. It's not that like you're not lining up a bunch of runners to see who's gonna be the fastest, and that person therefore is the perfect person for your project. That's a very kind of weird way of looking at, I think, a creative endeavor. I think that when you look at actors, when you look at crew, when you look at everything from in front of camera and behind the camera, there's no such thing as like, objectively better, objectively worse. What you do have, I think, especially when it comes to like representation, you have interesting and less interesting. And when you look at it that way, then as a filmmaker, I think that it's on you to be like, well, you're making either an interesting choice or a less interesting choice. And if you can make a more interesting choice, why are you not making a more interesting choice? And I think that the way that we frame that discussion needs to be less about like, oh, merit, and this person can draw this much money, and this person's like, no, I don't think that really at the end of the day that matters, because I think we're especially now at a point, because we have so much stuff and crap that we can watch like online and to entertain ourselves with. I guess we'll see. I just don't buy the idea that's like, oh, look at the star power draw of X. It's like, I think the biggest draw these days, and I think this is terrifying as a concept to the powers that be, the biggest draw is it any good or not? Because at the end of the day, if it's good, you're going to go see it. Your friends are going to say, yo, you should check this out. And you're not going to be like, yo, hold up, though. Where's my A-list actor? What's the IMDb rank of the people on here? Oh, it's not at I'm not going to watch. It's like, nobody says that. If the show is good, people are going to go see it. If the show or movie is bad, people don't go see see it. Like Scarlett Johansson is not helping Ghost in the Shell any. Ghost in the Shell is going to be whether or not the movie was good or not. And that's all that matters at the end of the day. And I think that's terrifying because we're in a system that's used to be able to be like, plug in person A, plug in person B, put this name on it, and boom, we're good. We don't have to do anything else. The marketing takes care of it for us. But we're past the point where marketing can take care of it for us.
I think that from a consumer point of view that's true, but I think because the studio networks are still sort of a more traditional point of view.
For sure.
From their point of view, it's still, I'm kind of sometimes surprised actually.
Yeah.
That it still matters to distributors, like maybe less to like a Hulu, but.
Well, because I saw it in the games industry because I spent a little bit of time there. You got to cover your ass, right? You got to be like, yo, but it's okay because, hey, I did everything. We got an A-list actor and it still failed. It's like, well, I did everything I could. It wasn't because of other things.
True.
You can point to it. You can save your job that way, right? Like, but that's dumb. That's not how the world works.
I mean, even on Dimension 4/4, I'd say like it was written certain ethnicities of certain characters. So like I think I agree with Freddie in that it's like on a creator level, on a filmmaker level, I think people should feel empowered to make those decisions if you think that serves your story in a constructive way, in an interesting way. Yeah. Because I mean, again, we're fortunate. We have great partners and with Hulu and everything, and they bought in with that. You know, they were game. So again, I think it results in a more interesting show, hands down. Like Utkarsh in the third episode, Kronos was specified. Sorry, and I don't think Constance Wu is in one of our episodes as well. I don't think that was specified, but yeah, I mean those decisions can be made on the creator level, I believe.
Yeah. That was great. That made me feel less like a game show host.
Yeah. I was like, we should just jump in.
That was very collaborative.
Yeah, I love that you can represent the studio side. I mean, I think it's incredibly fascinating.
I guess here's the question. Do you see that changing as time goes on? Do you see that shifting at all, or do you think that's still like they're locked in that world?
I think it depends, to your point about covering your ass.
Yes.
We're getting real.
I think it depends on how those quote unquote risky choices turn out, right?
Right.
Okay.
If there's a sort of quote unquote proven track record of in whatever that sort of measure of success is, then there'll be more room for that. But I think they are slowly, if not the traditional studios, then the Hulus and the HBOs and the Netflixes of the world are realizing that there are other demographics out there that want content that speaks to them from both a content and a appearance point of view.
I was actually just listening to Phil Yu from Angry Asian Man and Jeff Yang do this podcast called They Call Me Bruce, and they were just talking about Asian American cinema, specifically within the indie market. And it kind of talks about all these things in terms of like, it's kind of systemic because studios want to give people what they want based on like kind of evidence and track records and stuff like that. But it's like audience members also need to buy tickets and be informed about that. So it's like, there's so much action that needs to be done in order to kind of get this kind of thing rolling. Because we kind of had like this indie boom, speaking as Asian Americans, had an indie boom like 20 years ago, but that kind of hasn't really happened since, and it's interesting. Like there's a lot of action points that need to happen from multiple groups. Like consumers need to feel empowered to go do this and be informed. Like I definitely don't know a lot of Asian American cinema going on all the time, and like I need to make an extra effort to do that, So I think it's both,
But I think it's shifting slow.
Well, about as fast as you can expect gigantic billion-dollar corporations to shift, right?
Yeah. But it is sometimes interesting when, people that have meaning in the digital space may not have the same meaning in the traditional media space. And so
when they make the leap from digital to, let's say, TV or film, they're just not bringing the eyeballs.
Well, it's the tricky thing of conversion, right? So-and-so brand or influencers have XYZ subscribers on their YouTube channel.
Right.
Their value comes from the fact that they have an audience, a repeat audience, right? And they've cultivated this audience. But how are you going to move that group of people who are getting content for free to then go
and pay for content.
or watch on a different platform.
Yeah, and I would say that more and more from the perspective of those content influencers, they're looking at that leap and they're like, why do I need to make that jump? I got all the money I need.
Right.
I see the examples of people who go on like Conan or late night talk shows. They don't see a bump in their metrics that they care about. So what's the point? What do I get out of it? Is it money because I'm getting plenty of it? Is it fame because I'm already famous and I'm already you look at the Hollywood Reporter's list of like who's influential, who's recognizable. It's like I'm some of these guys like people recognize me more than Bruno Mars. So what do you have to offer at that point? And I think that's like the central conflict there because more and more the assumption is like, well, certainly they're going to these influencers want to make that leap to traditional, but why?
Because I think it's only those influencers who aspire for something other than just being they want to be like.
And I think to me to me that's where there's a really interesting distinction because when we talk about millennials, there's really two groups of millennials we're talking about. We're talking about people who did not grow up with phones and then people who did grow up with phones. Right. Because again, like I said, I grew up with Blockbuster Video, and we were watching Spielberg, and we were watching movies and renting movies.
I grew up with a pager.
Nice.
Pager. Remember what a pager is?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
But then there's a whole new group of kids who don't grow up watching that, and who they're idolizing is exactly that.
Exactly.
So I think you're getting less and less people who aspire to be anything else because they're growing up in the world where, this kid made more money than their parents are doing, and he bought a BMW playing Minecraft in school. That's what I want to aspire to be.
That's why I actually think that there's still, whatever the distinction is of the market is, there's still going to be there will still always be, or I would hope, because otherwise I'm out of a job, but always be like sort of the traditional long form formats. But there's still, I feel like, at least right now, there is still a need and a desire to have the shorter form, immediate, like one-on-one relationship with people on, for lack of a better word, YouTube platforms. So,
Jennie, kind of going along with that, being a part of the digital division at Lionsgate, do you specifically develop programming for like premium digital spaces like the Netflix, Hulu, or do you develop 10 to 15 minute episodes of anything?
So our division is currently only focused on the what I would call sort of traditional formats. So the long form feature length content, and on the episodic side, 22s or 44s.
Okay.
So our group is not currently producing short form because I think, as Freddie pointed out, I don't know if anybody's sort of figured out how to necessarily monetize the 10 to 15 minute bucket other than ad dollars, branded money. There isn't like Lionsgate wouldn't be able to distribute like the 10s or 15s in other markets.
Right.
So for us, it's not something that we're focused on.
And the ad dollar thing is like the big question right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right?
There's
Like
a
that's
whole
the
thing
big
going on
problem.
with the platforms. Yeah.
Like that's the big problem is like when you look at television, where's the 22-minute format come from? Where's the 44-minute format come from? It comes from a necessity to put ads around it, right? Television was originally like this ad-driven thing. So you have these sort of dual forces pulling. On one hand, it's like, well, Netflix don't care. Like I saw that Orange is the New Black just got leaked, like season 5 for Netflix.
Oh, we did?
But the problem was everyone's like, well, Netflix isn't going to lose anything because nobody's just subscribed to Netflix just for that season of Orange is the New Black. And I'm like, oh, no, it's a part of a whole range of things that I watch. Netflix is a service to me. So Netflix has got that figured out without regards to needing by providing a service and not needing advertising. And the other side of things, sort of the ad-supported side of things, it's like, well, one, we have potentially, there's the WGA stuff that's happening right now. And then there's also the question of like, what happens to that when you have a generation of people who aren't used to watching advertising, who don't need to watch advertising? And two, when right now the biggest issue facing YouTube, there's this whole ad boycott going on because it's the same problem that advertising faced at the inception of the internet, which is what happens when your ads show up next to questionable content. And you as an ad agency, by the way, are going to define questionable content in a much, much, much more broad way than like sort of the average person because you're very concerned with your perception of your brand.
Right.
I don't know if we have the tools necessary to be able to give them enough peace of mind. And so there's this, it feels like this big shift is happening right now where the internet has been advertising supported since the pop-up ad. And then as time has gone on, there's always been these sort of whispers of like, oh, you need to pay the people directly. Advertising isn't going to support you forever. What happens when, you know, advertisers censor or what have you, right? The question, and you're seeing things like Patreon show up, the services where people are able to support artists that they like directly, whether or not they're doing podcasts or drawing or live streams, whatever it is. So it's this weird economy shift that's starting to happen where people, I think, are starting to realize at the very least that it's a lot shakier than what it was. I don't necessarily know where it goes, but I think it's a lot shakier than what it was. And whether or not people then take that second step to be like, okay, well, then if there is something I support, I'm going to pay that person directly.
Yep.
How that plays out remains to be seen. But at the very least, I think the foundations of, cool, the internet is getting paid for because advertisers are getting your information, that side of things is starting to erode a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely very interesting because even at a place like Hulu, when you can get a subscription that's ad-free, and then you're like, oh, so how are they getting the money for whatever, and how are they bringing in the creators? The other thing I'd love to talk about is what's next for Dimension 404. Where do you see it going? It continues to be an anthology.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that's the fun of sci-fi anthology is that you get to do something new every time, you know, every single time you're at bat, which is cool. And I think that that's a cool and interesting format in a world where I think that you can have both. You can have the super serialized, like, oh, you want to start Game of Thrones now? It's like, all right, yo, clear your calendar because you ain't jumping in on this season right away, right? And you also have the stuff where it's like, you know what, I don't want to necessarily spend that amount of time. I want to just go get something a la carte, you know, moment to moment. I think that, you know, people want to be entertained in different ways, and that's I think the fun of sci-fi anthology. You get to explore a new world every time you go out. So, you know, hopefully we get a season 2. Hopefully we get to continue sort of telling the weird, wonderful stories that we want to tell in that universe.
Of course. I mean, I'm looking forward to season 2. That'd be great. For all of you, I have a question. In terms of kind of fledgling filmmakers, we have a lot of filmmakers here who are here with their first short. Me, I am. or just, you know, they're like looking to, I've talked to a bunch of people who are just like, how do I like get things together to kind of produce my first short, or I'm writing and my ideas. And so just people who are in this space and want to film something and put it up on YouTube and get it there and get eyes on it. Like, what kind of advice would you give to someone like that? I know we can learn a lot from Rocket Jump Film School, so that's a great starting point for you guys to kind of check out.
Can I ask a question? How many of you are filmmakers or aspiring filmmakers, like editors, directors, cinematographers? If you just okay,
Lots.
cool,
Yeah, 50%,
awesome.
yeah.
50%.
Yeah.
Ish. That's awesome. Oh, I guess that means I have to start.
Yeah, you did it.
What we always tell people is make stuff. Obviously, this audience is, I think, a little bit older than the audience we normally talk to, but I think it all appeals or applies to everybody. I'm assuming you guys are already making stuff, but I think it's like, you know, usually like we need people to get through the threshold. Thanks, Freddie. Thank you.
You're supposed to be supporting.
I know.
I've met some people who are like trying to get to their first thing.
Right, and I think a lot of it is, it's just, I mean, it's getting over the hump, right? Like people talk about doing stuff forever and ever and ever, and it like, I think nowadays things are so much less, they don't have to be as intimidating as they used to be. They don't have to be, they're not as exclusive as they used to be, right? You don't have to pay a bunch of money to go get camera and lenses. You can go just go out and do it. So I think just feel compelled to tell your story in a way that is distinctly you, and then just go find people to go make it. You know, you need maybe like 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, especially in this town, especially where we are. Like, this is such a different experience than most of the people we talk to, that like you can go out and make stuff. You know, we're not in, you know, Mississippi or Alabama or anything like that.
Careful, you don't throw too much shade on some other part of the country.
No, I'm saying that
There's
it's like
nothing
there's
wrong with
filmmakers
being in
everywhere, you know?
Mississippi,
There's aspiring filmmakers everywhere who want to tell their stories, but they don't necessarily have the resource that like Los Angeles does,
Yeah.
you know? So I think it is.
Plus, they could probably get away with it too, because here you get shut down for like even holding a camera.
Exactly. Like, you know, you can't fly a drone around here without being shut down in a second.
Yeah. But I would also say don't fall into what I would kind of call the USC pitfall, which is it doesn't have to be big.
Oh, that's a really good one. That's a really good one.
You know, I know many friends who spent many thousands and tens of thousands of dollars making their magnus opus short. Sorry, don't mean to offend anybody, but you should just keep it simple. It doesn't have to be a VFX spectacular. You figure out what resources you do have. It's really what's important, I think, is the story that you're trying to tell. And that needs to come across. Like, all the bells and whistles won't mean anything if your story's not coherent.
Yeah, I think limitations could be a good thing. And we put out this video about CG. It's called Why CG Sucks, Except It Doesn't. Freddie wrote the video essay last year on film school. But it is literally, I mean, the point you make is that CG doesn't suck. It's just we probably only notice bad CG when the narrative doesn't work. So like all that stuff can be bells and whistles, you know, like that CG is like a tool that helps you tell your story. So like if your story is two people in a room having this intense, you know, like romantic scene, or, you know, like it's a thriller or something like that, like use limitations to help sculpt what you can do best at that moment and get better. Keep making stuff and learn from your mistakes. Keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah, Freddie, do you have?
No, I think it's all along the same lines too. I mean, like, look, you really don't have a good excuse at this point, because in the past you could be like, yo, film's expensive, I can't afford it. So it's like, no, I mean, I think it's true. It's like, because I think at the end of the day, here's what you have to ask yourself, right? Like, if you really, really want to do it, there's really nothing in your way. So I think that's a harsh sort of thing, because again, we saw this in film school. It's like there's two types of people. There's people who really want to make movies, and those people go and make movies. And then there's people who really like the idea of being a filmmaker and all of the fun sort of stuff around it. And those people talk a lot about what they're going to be doing and how they haven't done it yet. And it's like, at the end of the day, if you want to do it, then you really don't have an excuse at this point. But as starting small, starting with something that you can sort of accomplish and take start to finish, I think that a key to it, here's my advice would be start small, but also take something start to finish. Even if you're like, it's not that, even if you don't feel like it's that good, don't do a bunch of half-finished projects. You get way more, you learn way more by taking something that maybe isn't perfect all the way from start to finish and having that under your belt than you do spinning up a whole bunch of stuff that never goes anywhere. You're better off having something that's like not good, but you finished it. That's going to be far more helpful for you in your path as a filmmaker than never seeing things all the way through.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
And we tell people to screen it, show it to people. Right. Like, I think that's something I learned in film school, because I was very protective about my short films, and, you know, you're very neurotic about showing who you show it to and stuff like that. But as Freddie said, there's no excuse for not putting it out there and like letting people look at it, tearing it apart, you know, like look at it with a positive attitude and see how you can get better from it.
And if you're a writer, just write. Like, set aside X number of hours a day. It's a job. You just have to focus on just writing. So if you say you want to be a writer, write.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice. Freddie and the rest of the gang, I would also love to talk about what's next for you guys. If there's anything happening beyond Dimension 404, beyond ROCKETJUMP, beyond Lionsgate, anything you can talk about. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of the stuff is under NDA or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on larger, sort of projects. We have a couple feature film ideas we're kicking around. We are looking at sort of our potential next series. So sort of in the mode of trying to figure out sort of what to do next. And also, I think a lot of time is sort of being spent thinking about like, what is this? Because the online side of the equation is definitely shifting quite a bit at the moment. And the question of being like, where is this going to end up? Is not clear, and I think we are in the midst of a shift with regards to the way people think about online and online communities, and so that's sort of a lot of the time in terms of what we're thinking about now, at least for me.
Yeah, I'd say on the ROCKETJUMP level, I think there is, I mean, as Freddie said, it's still a Wild West. I remember when I joined ROCKETJUMP, people were calling the digital space a Wild West, and I think it still is, because things change so rapidly, and you have to adapt to those shifts really quickly. So I think we're trying to examine like how we get to keep making stuff as artists and filmmakers in a way that fits within this larger world. Because that's what we're about. You know, Rocket Jump is a collective of filmmakers, I think. So yeah, it's kind of like sussing all that out and how do we keep making stuff, you know?
Yeah, that's great. Jennie?
We have, right now there's a couple of projects that we have that are kind of in final development, I would say, and hopefully close to going into production. We just finished one production wrapped in New York about a week or so ago. So we're pretty busy.
Making stuff.
That's awesome. Create, create, create. That's the advice we have for you today. Thank you guys so much. Freddie, Cherish, and Jennie, you've been an amazing panel. We're actually going to open it up to questions from the audience. So if you guys have any questions for these guys, let us know. We have a question back there.
Thanks. It's always something very exciting. Been watching your videos for a long time. What's your feeling about, say, VR, AR? You're still talking about traditional screenings, traditional deliveries.
Yeah, so I think here's, in a short take, I think VR works really well for games. I don't buy it for narrative necessarily, just because of the following. And again, I would love to be proven wrong on this. This is my quick take on it, which is, I think you look at the history of cinema is, every innovation is about giving a filmmaker control of point of view. So it's everything from the close-up to depth of field. Everything is about directing attention in a ordered way. VR is a world where you do not have that control. It's literally taking all of those away, and you're essentially trying to ring a bell over here to get someone to look around. So when I think about film and narrative and linear in that space, it's not linear in the same sense that I think about filmmaking or sort of the traditional narrative side of things. I think about it as experiential. Like, to me, what makes sense in that are things that do not necessarily require authorial intent to put you from point A to point B to point C. So like concert stuff, there's tons of stuff I think in the video side of things that can really work in VR. But then for us, as sort of a narrative filmmaker, I'm not excited about those possibilities in the same way even that I was excited about, as weird as it is, 3D has more interesting things to me from a narrative standpoint. Or even 48 or 60 frames a second high frame rate stuff has interesting storytelling and narrative things for me. So I see it really working as an interactive sort of medium, one where you have interaction between user and whatever you're making, which pushes me more towards game engines, which pushes me more towards logic, that you can actually have that kind of back and forth.
I'm sorry, real quick, just to finish that, follow that same idea. Ang Lee's halftime, what was that thing? He shot 120 frames, 4K and all that. Were you aware of that project, whether or not you saw that? And he changed the whole narrative as far as the idea of actors speaking directly to the lens, to the audience, which is still a narrative thing, but it was much more, I thought it was, in that sense, confronting that whole traditional narrative.
Again, I think that's what breaks down, right?
Yeah, I think I'm more open-minded about it because I think people like Ang Lee, and there's other people, influencers in the YouTube digital space who are trying to figure that problem out. I know there's one where the guy is literally just follow me, and then the narrative is kind of still experiential, but is being led in a much more direct way. So I think that, I think people are playing with it. It's a problem to be figured out, and I think someone will. It's just playing with the medium, it's so new. So I'm a little bit more open-minded. I think people are figuring it out, and it's exciting.
They just gotta make them headsets way less, man. I get all sweaty in them.
Yeah,
I'm
and you get, I get a little.
Me in the sweat box, I guess I'll watch a movie in here.
Yeah. And then it's uncomfortable when you wear glasses.
Oh, it's the worst with glasses.
It's the worst.
It's just
Contacts, Freddie.
No thanks.
Yeah.
No thanks.
Any other questions?
Hi.
Yes.
You spoke about Hulu wanting you to get high caliber talent, and I'm curious about the process of getting the cast members you want. How do you get high caliber talent like Mark Hamill or Lea Michele? How do you appeal to them to work on your show versus other shows that they compare you to, like Black Mirror or?
Right. So this is a lesson I learned from the direct to DVD world, which is everybody will be on your movie if you pay them enough. So that's one side. Like direct to DVD, it was like how do these guys show up on there? It's like just money talks. Everyone's got a price. The other side of it is it's the reality of one, especially at the sort of the level of actors that sort of we're talking about. Your material has to be good. A huge part of where we were able to pull was people came to us and they said, this script is amazing, I want to be a part of it, which was all credit over to Will and the writers for that, right? And the other side of it too, which was a huge advantage for us, was because this was an anthology show, we were not taking up tons of their time. It wasn't something like exactly. It was we had 7-day shoots, so it wasn't like so like for Constance, who's on fresh off the boat, it wasn't like I can't take this because I have a network show I'm on. It was we're off. I can take 7 days to do something, and this fits because we're very fortunate in that the anthology format really opens up your palette in terms of like who actors you can pull, because it's not someone who's like this person's gonna be a regular and they need to commit to a year potentially of all of this and potentially future. It's like, nope, they can come in, they can come out, they can play the role, they can go. That was, I think, very appealing. But more than anything else, that if the material isn't there, a lot of people, it's like they don't have to take it, right? At a certain point, a certain caliber of actor, it's like, nah, money doesn't really that much of an influence, so forget it. The material itself needs to be good.
Yeah, I think this crowd is mostly independent filmmakers, so it's like, the strength of the scripts, frankly, is what got a lot of the talent excited to join on Dimension 404, which was really cool.
In addition to that, I know the sort of the TV shooting schedule isn't as regimented as it used to be, but you should, if you are targeting talent that are usually on TV shows, then just plan to shoot during the hiatus.
Yep.
Because because they're on break, looking to do something that's a little bit more outside the box, know that they're not going to get paid a lot, but the shooting schedule is short, and so that's also appealing to them.
Yep.
Good question.
Yeah, good question. We have another couple of questions.
Hi, so I have a marketing question. So because of the shift with online content, SVOD, and the studios trying to kind of catch up, with that insight on entertainment marketing and film marketing, how do you guys readjust techniques and strategies, and kind of what is your, I guess, tip or insight for filmmakers, since a lot of that is changing based off distribution, formats?
Really good question. I think one thing that is universal that I learned from my time marketing in film marketing is that I think for a lot of filmmakers, especially independent filmmakers, marketing is kind of a dirty word. It feels very businessy, right? It doesn't feel like part of the art. But working on trailers for so long with people who are so passionate about it, like marketing is absolutely an art form. And if you view it that way and view your marketing as its own individual piece of content that needs to be entertaining and compelling on its own, you'll be a lot more successful. So I think that kind of is universal across the board. Like we always approach trailers, we always approached our BTS that way. Like your BTS has to have its own narrative, right? Doesn't have to be linked to the narrative of the show itself. It's just kind of what is the story of the people behind the camera and the people in front and the making of the thing. In terms of how things are shifted, I think it's so project-based, I think, nowadays, and you have things of different lengths. So I think it's like always looking at the individual project and serving that in the best way and finding a message that'll still connect with your audience. I don't know if you have a specific question about certain shifts, certain projects you're working on, or, but I think what applies universally for marketing still applies to like things that are happening now. In terms of ads, that's totally different. I mean, I don't think that's quite marketing, but yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but I'm happy to go at length further.
I guess I would also add that, if you are looking for a digital type release of your project, and it's an independent project, although I know it's really difficult from a budgeting perspective, do plan on trying to grab maybe 1 or 2 or 3 unique sort of, even if it's short 1 or 2 minute types of what they're calling these days added value content
Like
to help.
moments,
Yeah, like in addition to your standard BTS, something that sort of speaks to your movie that's a little bit more specific. And then also, if you are planning on self-marketing sort of on the various types of platforms like Snapchat, Facebook, and such, like each platform has, I think, its own unique point of view, its unique sort of consumer interface, and so plan to market your project knowing those specifics of each of those platforms because they are different.
Definitely, totally. That's so true. And I would also say have marketing conversations early. I think a lot of marketing pitfalls happen when you have them too late, like after you've shot and you're just scrambling in the middle of post. Like have marketing conversations in pre-pro if you can, because then, this is a weird example I always think of, but in the last Mission Impossible movie, Rogue Nation, there's, you know, the mask, this is a real detour, but there's a mask rip, you know, in the classic Mission Impossible moment is when they take the mask off and it's like, ooh. So in the movie, that doesn't actually happen. That's like a false, like it's just a flashback kind of thing. But I kind of feel like they had to get that moment for the trailer. You know, it's like that's a marketing moment. That's what makes Mission Impossible. So it's like, I kind of feel like maybe they had that conversation while they were making the movie or before they made the movie. So I know that seems like counterintuitive to making art, but having a strong marketing campaign helps your movie. It helps get more eyeballs on it. It helps, you know, it only, that's why you make the movie, right? To show people. So have marketing conversations early. Don't be afraid to fold those into the creative process. It could be a really good thing.
A couple other questions in the middle.
I have a question about when you are like launching a project in a digital space. I've kind of heard that I've heard that it's helpful to have one place to direct people, in terms of like maybe that's YouTube, maybe that's a website for just the project, or a website for the creator. And I wanted to know, or is it too confusing to have all those things? Like, is it better to have just one link that drives everyone to that same link? Or should we encourage ourselves to have every single avenue to get to the project? Like Facebook, Twitter, a website for the project, a website for the filmmaker. I'm just curious, because we're doing it all on our own. So.
Are you talking about specifically like a feature project or something?
Well, like if you take Issa Rae's Awkward Black Girl, I remember when it was launched, there was a website, Awkward Black Girl. There is also IssaRae.com. You have her YouTube channel, but ultimately, I'm just curious, if you have too many ways to get to the thing, is it, I've also heard the opposite argument where just like pick one thing and that's the platform that you're driving people to. So I'm curious your take on that.
I will jump into just the Issa Rae question. With having Awkward Black Girl on YouTube, that's how it was connected to awkwardblackgirl.com and IssaRae.com. So all the views were going back to the one link on YouTube. So
because the video was embedded in the
it was embedded onto the two websites. So I think it is, just from personal experience, it all did come from the YouTube site to get those subscribers on the YouTube site. And then if they wanted more information, let's say on Issa or on Awkward Black Girl, like behind the scenes or who was in the cast, they could learn more about it kind of on the particular websites. But Freddie can also kind of talk about his view on that.
Yeah, I think in general, it depends on your goal. If you're trying to drive to some form of action, be it like understanding of like where this is coming from or what have you, right? Like if you're trying to drive to some sort of like action on the user end, I think being more targeted is helpful, right? Like you look at like Dollar Shave Club. It's like go to dollarshaveclub.com, get your thing. Like it's very, very directed towards it. If you're talking about wanting to get eyeballs on the content itself, I think you're better served being as wide the net as possible, because everybody's going to have their own proclivities with regards to how they want to see things. So some people will be like, I want to go see it on YouTube. That's a very specific group of people. There's going to be some people, like my group of friends, like nobody watches YouTube stuff. They all watch stuff on Facebook. When you're talking about the content itself, you're going to exclude a certain amount of people if you only go to certain platforms, because there's such a it's like such a jump sometimes. As by the way, as annoying and like whatever as it is, it's like, oh, I gotta watch this on YouTube. It's like, oh, I gotta go. It's on my phone. Like it's like that's effort. Like as much as like that's not effort, it's still effort, you know. So in that case, if it's about the content itself and trying to get eyeballs to it, brand it and put it in on as many places as possible, because different people are gonna have different ways they want to watch things.
Yeah. And I've on social too, it's like certain sites discriminate other sites as, like if you link to a YouTube video in Facebook, I think the algorithm discriminates that, so you want to upload natively to Facebook. Like natively to Facebook. If you're, you know, if it's video content.
Facebook don't want their people going to YouTube.
They want people to stay on Facebook, right? So
I think that's also happening on Twitter.
Oh, it happens everywhere. Everybody's doing it.
Same with all the platforms, they want to keep things localized. So I think when we first started, my first reaction was like, you know, focus on one and have like, it's really embedding. Your video player still goes on all these sites, but it's all going back to YouTube. Like you can still do that, but nowadays things on other platforms are a little different too, where you might want to upload your videos to multiple places, as Freddie said.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question.
Great question, by the way.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a question that's kind of related to marketing, advertising in a sense, and as content creators, I was just curious with the advent, and it's funny that you mentioned the Dollar Shave Club, you know, with the advent of viral videos and whatnot. Do you see a crossover between just content creation and brands? And if so, what have you seen? And I guess in terms of what Jennie's seen, like in terms of financing, how does that affect content? Do you see the merging of those two or some collaboration between brands and content, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely a lot of, I mean, as I'm sure Freddie has seen too, I mean, I can't remember, I think there was a brand recently that announced that they're no longer spending any money on sort of traditional commercials and sort of putting all of their money into sort of targeted digital content. There's definitely more of a shift to that, but then you as filmmakers have to understand, I mean, there's definitely, as filmmakers who are sort of in commercials, it's kind of the same deal. So it's not, if you're looking to tell your own story, that's not what branded content is. You know, unless there happens to be a story, I don't know.
That fits with the brand.
Yeah, fits with the brand, and they're willing to spend X amount of money for it. But the brand will also want to know like what your distribution plan is. They might not necessarily give you cash for it, depending on what type of placement you're planning on giving to that particular brand, but they may support you in other ways like marketing support or soft support. But there is a lot of brand dollars flowing into the short form digital space because they've seen the consumers and millennials sort of moving in that direction in terms of how they watch content.
Yeah, I think just very quickly that brands want to tell their own story, so that's their focus. They're not necessarily, and I think that there was a point where they were like saying, hey, let's get people and raise digital awareness by going and finding interesting things and bringing us over here. It's for some brands, they don't have to do that. Like Red Bull, it's like easy. It's like, yo, we put our Red Bull logo and we made a guy jump out of space. Like, what else do you want? Like, we're done. It's harder for some brands. I think like, you know, like Charmin paper towels. I don't know what that brand story is, but their point is like, when it Bears, true, Bears. Oh. But the point is the way the brands are approaching it is they need to be able to tell their own stories. So the question is, you as a filmmaker, if you're willing to plug into that in sort of very much the sort of ways of old, then yeah, that totally works. A lot harder, I find these days, to be like, hey, here's my story, and I want the brand to support it, unless that happens to have kismet with what the brand's trying to do.
Yeah.
You know.
You can also, I would say, going back to like limitations as like aspiring filmmakers, you can use what you think the brand needs as inspiration for a story you would want to tell. You know, like I think of Dog Wick, which was a video we put out earlier this year, which was to promote John Wick 2, but it was an idea that had circulated around the office as, you know, I won't get into Dog Wick right now. But yeah, I mean, that was an idea that we had, and then Freddie pitched it to Lionsgate, and, you know, it became this promotional material that was a lot of fun for us to make, as, you know, it felt very in the vein of ROCKETJUMP, but also supported this movie. So, you know, as creators, you can definitely look at it that way. I would say with film school, we have we've worked with a lot of brands too, and I think what helped with us was that we had a very clear vision for what we were doing and what our story was, and then approaching or meeting other brands who felt in line with that and liked that story too. It's a little bit different, obviously, because we're educational with content, we're not necessarily narrative, but you know, we've had a lot of really, really positive experience with brands because it was the same goal, you know, the same intent. And so I wouldn't say that, like, you know, it's not necessarily like you have to put yourself aside to do brands. I think it is just finding good partners and then nurturing that and looking out for them in the same way that you hope that they would look after what your intent is as well.
And you kind of have to just keep in mind that ultimately, especially I would say, like, when I first started doing branded content at Pop Sugar, it was probably less so, but over the year that I was there, the brands were definitely more into the details of each of the video concepts. I would say that ultimately their goal is to drive sales. So how is this sort of piece of content going to move their sales numbers? So it's a business.
All right, thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Jennie, Cherish, Freddie, for being here. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you, guys.